Hello, musicians. So, the viola, took up viola, I think maybe about 3 weeks or a month ago. Maybe 3 weeks. And I wanted to tell you just how difficult it's been and how I'm getting on. So, I'm a cellist and a pianist, a composer rather than a performer, although I do record all my tracks myself. Um, but I'm not concert standard, put it that way. Composers lead a very different life to a performer. Very, very different. We agonize over single notes for weeks. It's really difficult, but in a very different way. For example, I could not get on stage live. I would rather, I'm just not cut out for that. I would rather agonize over a single note for 6 months than have to go on stage. I mean, my stomach wouldn't cope with that. I'm painfully introverted when it comes to things like that, which surprised me. But when I didn't find that out until I gave up alcohol. I knew I was shy, and I knew I needed alcohol to, do the gig or whatever it was I was doing. But I didn't quite realise that actually, by definition, I was an introvert. And you find these things out when you give up the booze. Not that I'm saying you should all give up the booze. Don't do it. It was, I've been pretty stressed out since I did that. And the reason I did was nothing to do with moral issues or, I think everyone should, get pissed and have a very good time. But it was my body just suddenly after menopause, and it just completely rejected it. And now if I have half a glass, I am sick as a dog. So, I had to give it up. Anyway, I'm not talking about booze. I'm talking about, although, it does interact with performing, doesn't it? A lot of musicians, have to do something to make themselves that person that exhibits this extraordinary stage presence and power. And I guess this podcast is about being a successful musician, amongst other things. Anyway, I decided to. I'm not sure what pushed me to learning a third instrument, and I've got a double bass coming soon, so I'll be doing 4. But I'm kind of fascinated with strings, and I guess when I listen to a piano, I always think it's a bit out of tune, because of course the notes aren't quite right on a piano. They're tempered in such a way that they divvy up nicely into those 12 notes. But actually it's incorrect. They're not, in vibration terms, as correct as a string could be, the resonances. And I think that gives me a curiousness about strings and what they can do. But it's not a scientific thing. It's a bit more creative than that. So I don't really understand it all, because I haven't got a scientific brain. And I have read this thing about the well-tempered piano many, many times. I still don't really understand it. I know we have a well-tempered year, don't we? That's why we have to have a leap year every 4 years, because the way the clocks are divvied up, the seasons and the times and the clocks and the weeks and all that are not quite exact. So there's an extra day. No, is there a day? Yeah. A day less or a day? I don't bloody know. Anyway, I sort of get that, and I'm guessing it's the same in a piano. But do correct me if I'm wrong. This is going on YouTube, so you can. I'll leave the comments open so that you can correct me. Anyway, the other thing. Right, no, let's go back to the beginning. So I really like the viola because it's not quite as shrieky as the violin. And I think it's just a little bit more street. I mean, of course it isn't really. But it gives me this sense that it's slightly more butch. And I like that. I don't want to be overtly feminine. I love the cello because you can pull your legs apart and stick it in there, and it's the only instrument where, you can get away with doing that. And I like that about it. It's a sign that you will not be this twee female musician that gently plays angelic harp or violin. Do you see what I mean? Well, doesn't a harp go between your legs? I'm not sure where the harp goes. I did get a harp for a bit, but decided it wasn't me for various reasons. We'll talk about that another day. Anyway, so also because I believe Mozart was a keen violist. Look, I've been playing for 3 weeks. There's a lot I need to learn about viola performers and viola players. So it's all very new to me. And no doubt it'll all sink in due course. So I got the Suzuki books. Now, people slag off Suzuki as a method of tuition, but it is really good for fast progress. So I'm working through book 2, and I've got to the last song. I mean, they're not performance standard, but the most awful thing about it is learning their clef. So the viola clef, really difficult. Now the note is either one note above the bass clef or one note below the treble clef, or the other way around. I can't remember. And that really confuses me because so now the way to do it is to remember certain notes. Now the good thing is that the open strings lie on all the spaces, or they're all on spaces, so that's a really good thing, just to help you as you're playing along. So if you see something and it's on a space, not a line, there's about a 50% chance that it's going to be an open string. So that's one little thing I learned. Then I'd learned the difference between the bass clef, and then I thought, no, sorry, the treble clef. And then I thought, well, why am I doing that? The difference between the bass clef. So now I've confused my head. Is it the one above or the one below? Do you see what I mean? It's all a bit of a nightmare, to be honest. Anyway, the thing with sight reading is the more you do, the better you get. And in my practice every day, I just work through every song in that book, the Suzuki book 2, every single song. And as I'm getting faster, I can now do the exercises as well. So yesterday, I was quite pleased with my progress. I thought, I think I'm actually getting this. I'm able to read a few more things. I don't have to now put all the names of the notes over the top. Now, I'm a great believer in doing that because if you don't get through a piece with fluidity, you're never going to learn it. If you have to sit there going, right, count up, C, D, E, F, oh, you're right, yep, it's a G, okay. If you have to do that every note, you're going to be so slow, it's not going to help. It's really not going to help. You need fluidity and you need muscle memory. So the first time, my first sort of practice, I had to write all the notes in. And I did that for about a week. And then once I got to, just yesterday, really, I noticed a shift. Now, I am doing a lot of practice and doing about 3 hours a day because I need to record with this thing, I want to write a song for one of the films that we do, the Book of Immersion. It needs a background song. And, I want to utilise it. I've bought this on credit, this instrument. It was £1,700. This is now a debt. It owes me. You see what I mean? It owes me this instrument. Now, unfortunately, I'd ordered a vegan orange stringed viola bow, and there was such a drama getting it. It came from overseas. I think it's French made. I'm not sure. They're carbon. It's a carbon handle, which is great for me because I'm forever dropping them, bashing them, answering the door with a bow in my hand, picking up my coffee, bashing against the music stand, etc., etc. And the wooden ones break so easily. So I like the carbon. I also did a bit of research about horsehair and how the horses aren't treated very well, and they pull the horse hairs out, which is very uncomfortable for the horse. It's not very nice. And so I thought, well, this vegan thing. Now, I also bought a vegan carbon bow for my cello, So I already knew that it was okay. I'm not going to say it's necessarily as good as a £1,500 bow, because I've never played with a £1,500 bow, but I have played with a £300 bow, and it felt better when I first got the vegan one. The wooden one felt better, but now I've got used to it, and it does take a while. And you have to change your strings probably to get either a more sensitive string or a less sensitive string, depends on your personal bowing. But I use high tension strings and the vegan bow on my cello. Now the strings that I've got on my viola, it's an electric viola, are ones that are specifically made for the best sound on an electric instrument. And I have those on my cello as well. And things are starting to come together a bit in terms of recording. I think things are going to be a lot clearer now, and I'm going to have less fuzz. Not fuzz from the electronics or the digital messaging, actual fuzz from the string. It was sounding a bit furry, like the strings were furry. I also use a rosin that's much stickier, and it's recommended by the company, so you might want to look at that. You need more rosin, but you need to rosin up more often. I mean, I rosin up pretty much every 2 practices, which is about every 6 hours of playing. So what else have I noticed? Well, my bow arrived yesterday, so now I've been playing it with a cello bow. And I wasn't getting a sound that was particularly beautiful. But yesterday I noticed, even though I've got to get used to this new bow, it's longer and it's lighter. So it's very different. It feels very different. It sounds quite, I'm sort of making beautiful sounds, and I'm able to do a gentle vibrato. Now, the thing with vibrato is if you notice the vibrato, you're doing it wrong. If your listener notices a vibrato, you're doing it wrong. So don't be all, laboured over it. A really subtle vibrato that just sounds beautiful that's what you're aiming for. The last thing you want to do is something that people notice. Why is she going flat and sharp there? Or, oh, that's an interesting vibrato, or very powerful vibrato. That's according to the great violists, that is not what you're aiming for. Your listener shouldn't be able to hear, or, shouldn't be able to notice, not to hear it, to notice it. So, after 3 weeks, I'm starting to read that god-awful clef. I'm getting through book 2, but I'm not ready for performing, but I don't need to perform, I need to compose. Very different thing. I need to do, I always improvise my string instruments over the track anyway, after I've sung it. So the singing's improvised as well. Everything's improvised. Piano, every track is improvised. The only thing that isn't improvised, well, no, the drums are improvised as well, really. Now, when my double bass comes, I think I'm going to be using a pizzicato method and a jazz method. But I'm not going to promise anything yet, because I actually don't know until it gets here. So it's a red rockabilly bass, and it's very percussive, and it's good for slapping. So I'm really looking forward to having a less mechanical sounding drum. I'm going to utilise the double bass as I would a drum box. Yeah? And I'm very excited about it, but my strings have not arrived. So, so many hold-ups in customs. They were checking for contraband on one of my items. The whole thing has just been a bit of a nightmare. you can't hurry excellence. And the longer it takes for the bass to get here, the more time I have to spend on my cello and viola. So in a way, So taletellerclub.com. If you want to find out more and touch base, contact me. We've also got, obviously, YouTube. And what else have I got? Well, I guess that's it, really. We don't need any more than that, do we? We don't want to be too thin out there, guys. Play some great music today.